Afternoon, Tim. How you doing?
Afternoon, Shabbar. I'm very good. Yeah, looking forward to Christmas. How are you?
I'm very well. It's going to be a wet Christmas. It feels very wet at the moment. We've had a lot of rain today. I had to sit in the car for about 5 minutes to avoid getting soaked.
And
So
we have both had leaking roofs, I think.
there is a theme emerging. But anyway,
On with today.
on with today's show. We're going to be exploring how you can change your story with money heading into the new year. So we did our New Year's episode, which was our takeaways from 2025, the things that we felt could propel us forward into 2026. And I think we're going to start off with how we can change your story. So what can listeners expect to get out of today's conversation?
Yeah, great. Okay. As you say, we're recording before Christmas, but this will come out early New Year. We've already reviewed the year, and we were thinking about one really interesting, fun area of experimentation people can do around money this year. And the idea is you can apply this idea to any situation. We'll give a few examples today. So whether it's about spending money or saving money or asking money or receiving money, we've talked a lot in 2025 about detective work and getting to know your story. And I want to introduce today the idea of deliberately and consciously choosing a different story about a particular money behavior. And this can be really fun. It's not particularly a first step or a beginner's skill. So if this is the first of our podcasts you've listened to, have a go, but listen to last year as well. But if you have been listening regularly, what we hope is this will really support you to free yourself up in, again, could be any or many areas of life. And the power of a deliberate new story can suddenly take the emotion away or the struggle away, or suddenly create lightness where there'd been heaviness and stuckness. So by the end of the day, it'd be great if people listening can think of one new story or one tricky, challenging area of their money life and begin to think about a new story they can experiment with this year.
Yeah, that's that whole idea about getting stuck in a story. It's almost like the human condition that we get stuck. We get stuck in stories, and our thinking just leads us to places which are just not very, very conducive to a good life experience, I found.
Well, I mean, we can go very deep, but yes, the thinking mind, it was the quantum physicist David Bohm who said, thought creates the world and then says, I didn't do it. In other words, our thinking minds and the stories we tell are constantly creating what we then think is reality, but really it's just a bunch of thinking and mental activity that we get stuck on. So we can go very deep.
Let's not.
But this is actually a really nice way. Changing our money story is a really nice way into that depth, but in a very practical way. So let's dive in. And where I wanted to start was with your story last year of trying to pay for and hire some marketing help. Yeah. Now, regular listeners will know sometimes we go deep on Shabbar's stories, or indeed sometimes my stories. We're not going to go deep into your own work today. But what I recognize as your friend and colleague is you've been through 2 or 3 stages of this question, which many people with their own business or self-employed people will have to figure out, which is, well, I want some help. How do I find good help? In this case, consultancy. For anyone listening, we're just going to use this as an example of different stories that you tell yourself with any situation around money. And then in the second half of the podcast, we'll go into ways you can all try this, and I'll give some other examples. So, briefly then, sometime, I guess, early in 2025, you decided I'm going to get some marketing help, find a consultant.
Yeah, I'm always looking at, okay, well, how am I going to crack LinkedIn? How am I going to crack LinkedIn and use that channel to find my ideal clients?
Right.
Who I can help with retirement planning and making sure that they've got enough to live the life that they want, and make sure that they're investing in the right way,
et cetera. Yeah.
And so when it comes to then finding someone to help me with, I get heavily invested in, first of all, is this person the right fit for my business? Do they care enough? are they going to screw me over? Are they going to care about my business enough? And these were some of the early things that were swirling around in my head. Then when eventually I did end up working with someone, it turned out not to be a great fit and didn't get the results that I want. And then I'm left feeling a bit stupid for choosing the wrong person to help. Also questioning my ability as a business owner to grow the business, and all of these other judgments start coming in. It just leaves me feeling in a really quite dark and grim place. And we've had conversations. I'm like, I'm just not doing it right. I just don't know. And this area of marketing seems to be my nemesis. And there's been a bit of a shift this time round when I've found someone, but we're not going to go there just yet.
Let's pause to notice the first story.
Yeah.
Right. So thank you for sharing. And again, people listening to this, you may have no interest in marketing, but this is very common in different areas of spending money, right? So if we take it simply, the first thing is, although you're talking about it quite free now, this was emotionally difficult for you, wasn't it? Like you struggle with this for what, months on and off?
I'd say it crops up every year since I've been running the business. There's always been expenditure on marketing, and there's always been a feeling of not quite getting it right.
Right. So the first thing is, a good place to look for what is my story and can I change it is in these repeating stuck dynamics around money, whether it's earning it, saving it, spending it. For you, that's every year I spend some money getting marketing help. And it's not just that it doesn't work as I'd like. That can happen. It's hard to do, but it brings up a real emotion for you. Feelings of stupidity, frustration, being ripped off. So as always with this work, the clue is in the emotional response. It's perfectly fine to say neutrally, yeah, it's quite hard to hire consultants. Yeah, it's quite hard when you're a one-person business to find good professional help. But when I say it and then it's a big emotional deal, that tells me there's some kind of story going on there that I'm probably unaware of and maybe I could change. And you've expressed it very well, Shabbar. A few things is a slight fear or paranoia, someone's going to screw me over. And then when it doesn't work, some self-blame. I'm stupid, I'll never get this right, etc. Now, we could dive deep and really get into the stories. We won't do that today, but I just want people listening to recognize how easy with the emotion comes. The first emotion was like a slight apprehension, concern. They're going to screw me over, rip me off. And then when it doesn't work, instead of just going, oh, that didn't work, that's a shame, that happens in business or whatever, it's like, I'm really stupid. So we can work with this at the level of projection and reclamation, which we've explored in many previous episodes. And we can simply notice something about the story. And before we go on to how it has improved, my guess is there's an umbrella story, right? You said every year I invest in marketing. And my guess is every year there's a sort of story, even before you choose the consultant, about this whole part of business. Does it make sense? Like, I don't know what it is, but I could imagine, you tell me, I'll give some examples. I hate doing this, but I have to do it. I'm no good at doing this, but I resent paying the money, but I need to. Or this will only be a success if I get results very quickly. Or there'll be all sorts of stories, even before you contact the consultant, about what it would mean for this to go well or not well.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. If you just feel that you're in a box and it's something that you've got to do and there's no other option, and you're very limited because this is the only way, and it doesn't feel natural and authentic and all of that sort of stuff.
Okay. So I'm in a box, I'm limited, but I have to do it. And I notice in your language, you immediately said, you feel like this, you feel like that, but actually I might feel different with marketing. I make my own mistakes, have my own regrets, but we're talking about you. And this is the point in any money situation, buying a house, selling a house, having a job, not having a job. We will be very influenced by the atmosphere of the story. And the story is often not the same as someone else going through the same thing. Okay, so fast forward a little bit and you've gone through 2 or 3 iterations of this year. How many different consultants have you worked with?
Over the years, I mean, I've worked with, let's say 3 or 4 different people to try and help with marketing.
But this year, how many?
Oh, in 2025, I think 3.
3. Okay.
Yeah.
So again, there's been various steps. We won't dive in. But then you told me today you've just started working with a new one.
Yeah.
And it seemed to me that your energy was lighter and a little bit more carefree than it has been. Is that fair?
Yeah, exactly. Just a lot lighter and a lot less pressure, and approaching it with an air of lightness based on the fact that we had a conversation, and treating it, I think in your words initially was around, well, you're kind of, you might have to spend a certain amount of money before you get the results or find out what works. So it's all like an investigative endeavor.
Right.
And so when I sort of reframed this one, I was just like, actually, I'm going to be spending money for the next 6 months, and I don't know if it's going to work. And if it works, great, that would be fantastic. But if it doesn't work, it doesn't reflect anything about my qualities. And I
Right.
think that was the important thing that just let me be a bit freer, and actually
Right.
now quite excited to try it and see.
Lovely.
And actually, if it works or doesn't work, that's okay. But I will get information and I will be more informed going forward. And it's usually because I feel like, oh, you've wasted the money, but I'm not seeing it as a waste of money now.
Yeah.
And so tying all of that stuff up with money, that I'm wasteful, I'm stupid, this, that, the other, around money, and choose, because choosing the marketing person is really just a proxy for what's spending the money,
Yes.
essentially, and what's going on with the projection onto that. So yeah, that's all it is really. And it feels less burdensome because there's no weight of expectation and pressure on me now to get it right, or whatever was previously weighing me down.
Brilliant. So let's notice something about this, maybe a couple of steps, and then let's talk about how other people listening can use this in their own lives. So sure, you noticed that for you, a big story was something like, well, there was lots about, I don't like doing this, I'm boxed in, I have to do it. But actually, I need a quick result. And if I don't get a quick positive financial result, this tells me I am being wasteful and stupid, right? Yeah, we can work with those to reclaim the parts of us that are wasteful and stupid and their opposites. And we've talked about that in previous episodes. But we can also just change our story about the whole thing. And what you and I were talking about before we started recording today is, in business terms, it's as simple as you've moved from framing this as a urgent marketing activity that needs a quick payoff to a long-term research and development activity. You've gone from saying, I have to get quick payback, otherwise it's a waste of money and I'm stupid and blah, blah. And that's all got lots of pressure. And now you're saying, well, I'm going to learn something. I want it to work, but I want to learn something, and probably I have to try different things to find out what works for my business. You're still spending the exact same amount of money. You still don't know if there's going to be the return that you want, but your story is, this is learning, research, development, and I'm okay to do that, rather than this is some business thing that I feel pressured to do and needs a quick result. So I hope people can hear, even if we haven't done what we're calling on this podcast and what Peter Koenig, founder of this work, calls detective work and then reclamation work, we're just choosing to tell a different story. Is that a fair description of your experience?
Yeah. And just coming back to this stuff doesn't happen overnight, this freeing. I mean, maybe for some people it does, but for me, it's been a bit of a wrestling match, so to speak. And so I guess my 2 pence worth on this is, you've just got to stick with it. And you've got to keep challenging the narrative and questioning. And, sometimes the more you read stuff, or the more you observe the world around you. And even when I listen to the gurus of the world in terms of various marketing, business, etc., failure is not seen as something to be, it's almost to be celebrated, right? So is there any such thing as failure when we're looking at this either or? You're either a success or a failure. And I think it's very easy to put yourself into a camp. Whereas if it's just an experience that you're learning from, and most of the successful people count on their failures as their biggest successes, right? Because that's the way that they ended up getting to the thing that you know, making them whatever it was, lots of money or launching a product or being a success, came from several failures. And so I think that the detective work is just so crucial in this work that you just got to keep doing it.
Well, one of the things we say as part of the detective work, you can go really deep into your own personal process and your stories and your past. But the other thing you can do is just notice counter examples in the news, in the newspapers, with people you meet. Just notice the existence of counterexamples to what you believe. So, for example, I start off believing everybody with money is more happy. And I just don't notice how many miserable Hollywood billionaires there are who clearly their personal lives are a wreck. And I also don't notice how many people who maybe have very limited money have very rich, happy lives. I just don't notice it. Yeah. So it's about noticing those counterexamples, whether it's success, failure, stupidity. That's all great to do. And you're right, the more we start to notice it, we start to realize that my money reality in any area of life, it isn't reality. There's lots of different examples out there. It's a product of my stories, my narrative. And as I start to notice that, one thing I can do is this deeper work with reclamation. But if I notice, I'm just holding this story about this, then we can get into, well, maybe I will deliberately, consciously create a different story about an area of money behavior that's tricky for me. So I'll give another example. Another example would be people who struggle to charge high fees for their work, right? So lots of people I work with, they're self-employed, they have their own businesses, they love what they do. Many people, particularly in kind of therapeutic, healing, helping professions, artistic professions, often feel very under-resourced, often don't have much money, and they find it really hard to increase their fees. Even, I don't mean extortionate, huge fees, although they could, but even to a level that sustains them. They find it much easier to reduce their fees or give bursaries or help out people who need. And that's lovely in a way. It's a sign that they're caring and helpful and not in it for the money. That's great. But there can be a blind spot there. And there can be a story about what it would mean to raise their fees.
Yeah.
And typical stories would be things like, well, I shouldn't get lots of money for doing work that's spiritual or healing. That can be one. That's just a story. Or if I charge more, I'm exploiting people and I don't want to exploit people. Or it would be very greedy and materialistic to charge for this beautiful artistic work and I don't want to be like that. So again, we can work with that at the level of reclamation. We can reclaim and be more in contact with our greed, our exploitation, etc. But another thing we could do is just say, I have decided unconsciously, without realizing it, every time I think about raising my fees, even to a level that would just give me an okay life, this whole story comes in that tells me I can't do it or mustn't do it. Maybe I change the story. And then you can be quite creative. It takes a bit of practice. But what would be a story that feels true? Because you don't create one that's completely seems so alien because you just won't have the confidence in it. What feels true or aligned or authentic enough, but quite different from the story I've been telling? So an example could be, I charge more money. That's a sign of my confidence in what I do, right? That would be an example. Or another one could be for someone who consistently under-resources themselves. I'm going to charge more money. I'm going to raise my fees. That is a sign of my self-care. That's a sign of me truly looking after myself in the way that I look after my clients so well. So we find another story that's still aligned with what's important to us, but it helps us move past what we call an edge or a limitation. So in your case, it was like, well, me spending money, that's a sign of my investment in learning and research and trying things out. That gave you more freedom and lightness compared to, it's a sign of I have, when I'm stupid and people are ripping me off, which creates a tightness. So let me pause there. Maybe we give some other examples, and maybe people listening can start to think, what story am I telling myself about some area, and how could it be more expansive? What do you think?
Yeah, totally agree with you about changing the story. And I think it's important to note that changing the story and whether you believe it
Yes.
are also two different things. And sometimes, they have the saying, I don't know if this is you sort of fake it till you make it. But
Mm-hmm.
in terms of the story, it's almost like you've got to tell yourself the story. And even if you don't truly believe it, there's such a power in like trying out the new story and sitting with it, but maybe playing with the situation and just role playing it out. And it might, even that can move you maybe closer to traversing the edge or the boundary or whatever it is that we're referring to. And when you were talking about the fees, I was just like, well, what would you do in that situation? You're reframing the story, but also like, what if you sort of just played around with the number that you charge and say, okay, well, if I just increase my fees by £10, how does that make me feel? What's going on for me? Does that make me feel greedy or not? And you start to sort of gauge also the number in that situation. So I think being playful and open is just a gateway to getting more insight into what's going on.
I think that's right. And I can't remember the episode, but I think back in September, October, we did a whole episode on being light and playful with money. I want to make a distinction between two things. One is starting to find what we call the edge. So I think you're right. If I do little experiments, well, what if I increased it by 2p? What if I increased it by 50p or whatever? You could do that with your marketing spend. Or what if I thought it could take 6 months till I see any results, or 7 months? That's very useful. And for me, that's about starting to notice these artificial boundaries we create. This would be exploitative. This would be okay. This would be a waste. This would be okay. That's really useful. And then the distinction I want to make is experiments and investigations that help identify the edge, but they don't necessarily help us step over. And then I think when I find the edge, to help me move into, if you like, a new pattern, right? When I step over an edge with money or in any other area, it's like I'm a little bit a new person. That's where I think a story that helps me live out that new person can be helpful. I can play with different stories. That's the point. I might find some stories help me. Coming back to my under-resourced, undercharging, wonderful healer, it might be that they try, this is a sign of my confidence in myself. And maybe that really helps them. Maybe it doesn't hurt so much, but when they go, oh, I'm going to try another story this week. Charging more allows me to really look after myself, and then I get to help others even more. They might notice that that story kind of actually, again, lands in their body or touches their heart. So I agree with you on one level. You don't have to believe the story, but I also find that it's possible to find a story that somehow lights you up.
Okay. Yeah.
It connects with something. It's just you never thought about it that way before. So just as we say in the money work, often our new story kind of lives in the body, not in the thinking mind. I could play with different stories and find what's the one that gives me a little fire in my belly or a little emotional motivation. Chances are that's a story that has more chance of sustaining a new money behavior.
Yeah. So looking for signs within for me, just going back to that, reframing it of, well, actually, this is just R&D or something along those lines.
Yes.
Just made me feel light and less tight and rigid. And that's just an indication that story is a good one to run with because it landed in the body.
Yes. It's just you'd never thought about it that way before. So this is a transition we make. We think we're dealing with reality, but actually we're just telling ourselves a load of old stories we've picked up from somewhere, usually the news, society, parents, who knows what. We repeat those old stories endlessly to ourselves without noticing, and we think that's reality. So it doesn't occur to us to change story. But then we can try different stories. And then, I think connecting with the body, it may feel unfamiliar and a little bit strange, but it's like, ooh, I like this. And then the other thing I want to suggest with as much love and kindness, Shabbar, as I can, is my guess is when you were investing money in marketing from that tight, they might rip me off, they might not love my business, this might show me how stupid I am. I bet you're a pretty crappy client to work with. Whereas if you enter into a relationship, you spend exactly the same money, you have the same time scales, you still want your outputs, but you're light and open and interested in learning, you've reframed. I bet you're a much more delightful client to work with. And therefore, I think it's fair to say there's more chance that this is a successful outcome.
Yeah. And just to flip it, I just had a client, or not a client yet, but a prospect who'd come to me and had previously worked with an advisor and had a very bad experience, and thinks that all financial advisors are like secondhand car salesmen. And, we spoke about that, and I really took the time to understand what happened in that previous relationship. And then naturally the story that he was telling himself, and I can totally understand why he would have that story, that, most financial advisors out there are going to be like that. And now he's on the hunt because he needs help, but he's very guarded, etc. And I can easily see how that could play out in a relationship when someone's told themselves a story and believes that that is a reality. It's going to make for a very difficult relationship going forward. So I can see it from the other side, just with this particular person.
Well, that's great to experience it from both sides. And inevitably it will, coming back to this point, that the stories we tell ourselves, usually unconsciously, create reality. So if my story is, I'm worried this will be a waste of time and they'll rip me off, I'm much more likely to interpret whatever they do. They could be the best, most creative, loving marketing person in the world, but I've got a filter that's looking for signs that they're ripping me off or I'm wasting my money. So that will interfere with the relationship. I want to offer one more example of this. I hope that's helpful and people can take it away. We often talk on this podcast about the difference between the life path and the money path. And what we're encouraging people to do is, as far as possible, put my energy into my life. What is it I really want to do, accelerate, spend my time on now, with and without money? And it's challenging and we need to do some work, but it is possible. And one of the things we often say, we've talked a lot in various episodes about people who are very worried about the future, and they're very worried about pensions and savings. And it's not unusual that people will deny themselves life now. They'll deny the things they really want to do and spend their money on now because of the future. They want to be taken care of in the future. It's a strong pattern. So what I want to say is, for someone who's maybe listening to this podcast or starting to think about things differently, to say, well, yeah, of course, I want to be sensible about the future. I'm not being stupid with money. But maybe it would be good to mobilize more of my money now to really go on the trip I really want to do, or retrain, or really have wonderful experiences with my family, or whatever it is, take care of myself. Whatever I want to do now, it can feel a bit scary if it's all about the future, if I'm worrying about the future. So I can feel a conflict. I think that's another example of where noticing the stories we're telling ourselves become important. And we can do reclamation work, but actually there's often an overarching story which goes something like this. The future is scary, therefore I need to deny myself now to prepare or deal with a scary future. Does that resonate?
Yeah, I mean, that definitely does. And a lot of clients that I see are caught up in that narrative. And that's predominantly through upbringing, I think, as well. But also the judgment or the story is that I'm the type of person that is XYZ, and it's usually sensible, practical, frugal to an extent through upbringing. And therefore they're caught in that sort of pattern of an inability to even contemplate living life or doing the thing now because that would go against their identity that they've kind of built up through this story of the type of person they are, and everything is now placed on the future. And it's really trying to bring it in that sense of balance to say, well, actually, like, what about living for the now and using the money to support you, but going against that story that someone's built up about themselves and their identity is it's the part,
as you say, it takes time, it takes energy.
But it's the enjoyable part of the work that we're doing, and the work that I can take back into my practice is that we're bringing a new dimension to the world of planning for your retirement, because you can have these conversations which can really free you.
So let's take another step there. I think it's useful to consider we have two types of stories in a way. We have stories about ourselves. So I'm sensible, I'm a responsible person, and those we work with the reclamation. This is identity work. We also have stories about the world or stories about the future. So that's not quite the same as identity. The reclamation statements, well, I am responsible with and without spending money on a fantastic holiday, or I'm reckless and it's great. And that can bring a lot of life to people. Those are I statements where we reclaim some part of ourselves that we've got tied up with money. Now, again, we've done previous episodes about reclamation, and we will continue to do that. But there's also stories about the world. The world is a scary place. The world is a place where anything bad could happen, and I need to protect myself. These are deep, deep stories about the world, and they're absolutely support. Anyone who looks at the news, we are bombarded 24/7 with all the scary, bad, horrible things that can happen. No wonder we're all anxious about the future. Now, again, there are disturbing trends in the world. There are real concerns about the future. We should engage with them, but it doesn't mean we should be mentally anxious the whole time and think the world's a terrible place. So a conscious story we could choose to tell ourselves could be something like this. If I notice that I'm saving for the future and denying myself now, could be because I think I'm responsible. But maybe I actually live with quite a lot of fear about the world, or maybe I really do not believe the world is a place that will support me to live as I truly am. So if I recognize that edge, that resistance, and if I'm really ready in 2020 to think, well, I'm not going to be stupid about the future. I'm not going to ignore savings and pension, but I am going to consider spending money now on things that truly bring me joy, happiness, that I really want to do for me, my loved ones, for society, whatever that may be. Then rather than go, I can't do that because the world is scary, a conscious new story could be, I will spend the money on doing this good life-centered thing. And that is a sign in my trust in life. That is a sign, or it's an example of me trusting that if I come from my heart and use my resources on my life path, somehow life will respond in a good way. Now, it's a big shift and we can fiddle, but it's a different story. It's not just about me. It's about my story about the world. And we think in this work, when we talk about life-centered and money-centered logics or ways of thinking or paradigms, we encourage people to go into a forest or go into a wilderness and see actually life does look after life. Life does actually work in such a way where everything is sustained. I mean, we humans with our money-centered logics are doing a pretty good damn job of messing that up. But we encourage people to see that actually maybe this idea that I could trust life to support me to live life fully is not just a hippie new age waffle. Maybe there's some real wisdom in there. But whether you think that or not, it could be a very interesting story to explore in 2026.
Well, just during our first take of this podcast, I got interrupted because I won something in the Christmas raffle. Just as we were talking about the feeling of being constrained and the marketing being a really difficult thing to deal with. And suddenly I feel a bit liberated. And just as we were talking about that, someone comes in with, hey, you've won this in the Christmas raffle. So there you go. Life looking after life.
Yeah.
It's just a small little trivial example, but it's quite
Well, I think we could do a whole podcast on that because you were just talking about the fear of being ripped off.
Yes, that was
it. And
it.
the door opened and someone gave you a gift.
Yeah.
And that's a very, very interesting example of one way of thinking and another reality. And how I want to summarize this for today, probably we should finish soon. We're not just working with kind of crazy belief statements or gritting our teeth and doing affirmations, but we are really encouraging people to consider a story I have, not just about me, but about the world or about the situation, and whether we can find a story that has some resonance in the body and that might open up a whole different set of money choices, money behaviors.
Great. I think that's where we'll end for today. So 2026 onwards and upwards.
Onwards and upwards, yeah. Enjoy your prize, whatever it is.
Whatever, yeah, I will do.
And may we all have many unexpected surprises and prizes in 2026.
Well, I would really like our listeners to like, subscribe, and share this with a friend for 2026. That would be great. So onwards and upwards. I'll see you next time, Tim.
Thanks, Shabbar. See you soon.